and I always kind of wanted to run my own business at some point. I didn't necessarily know what it was, and then that combined with the fact that I'm not necessarily that traditionally academic meant that problem solving and tech was something I could lean more into.
Tell us what it was like being recognised as one of Yorkshire's 42 under 42.
Mixed, to be honest. So obviously everybody loves recognition.
Yes.
What I'd say is that the things that got me that accolade, or get everyone accolades, we're doing day in, day out anyway. I think right now where we're at is everybody's aware of AI. I think people just brand AI and automation the same thing. I think automation's been around a lot longer and is readily available, but people don't utilise it. And then I also think that right now people kind of want this flashy, shiny AI, but they haven't done the basics in utilising Microsoft 365 properly and things like that. So I think the world's going to change with where we're heading with all this sort of stuff. But I think right now the key thing to do is to get your house in order, in a sense. And then when these AIs are becoming more mainstream or you more accessibility to it, you're going to get more benefit moving forwards. I think there's a whole, I guess, conversation there around boundaries as well. And I did have this chat recently with someone that runs a HR and people company about how your phone has like all your personal elements in it, but work has crept into it.
Welcome to this week's episode of Akoni Tech Talks. Jamie, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Like all episodes, we're going to get straight into it, find out a bit more about your career story and your journey to where you are today. So, Jamie, I'd love to know what inspired you to co-found Everon and what your vision was for the company when you started.
So I think I probably have a different origin story from most, in the fact that we actually worked for kind of another company initially, myself and the other co-founder, and we kind of grew into ultimately running it, and then went through a management buyout with our existing sort of boss or shareholder at the time. So I don't think there was ever a kind of point where we had a clear definition of we're going to start X, Y, and Z. It was a case of we kind of worked in the business, we were growing and maturing, and we realised there was probably like a different direction we should be taking it in. And the other shareholder we had at the time was the sort of later stages of his working life, didn't necessarily share the same drive or goals. And then that kind of became a natural point of, right, let's go for a kind of buyout and redefine what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I don't think there's ever like one particular moment. What I'd probably say is, in terms of vision, we started off being quite like jack of all trades, but realised the direction that we wanted to go in was more niche down. We wanted to just focus on Microsoft, B2B, not B2C as well. So I think over time we kind of realised that was the direction we wanted to go in, but again, probably not one clear moment where it was, this is what I'm going to set out to do.
Yeah, and you have over 15 years of experience in the IT industry. Where did that interest in IT kind of first start?
So I think randomly when I was at school, so we didn't have a computer at home, but we had one at primary school, I think this was, and I just had a natural understanding of, I guess, like I could pick it up quick, and it just worked with, I guess, my logical thinking. So that was the point where I realised maybe I could go further in tech or IT. And I always kind of wanted to run my own business at some point. I didn't necessarily know what it was. And then that combined with the fact that I'm not necessarily that traditionally academic meant that problem solving and tech was something I could lean more into. And I kind of just carried on in that direction, essentially. So from doing my A-levels, I did part-time work in a sort of computer shop. Even before that, I'd done some work experience in building surveyors, doing CAD and that kind of techie-related bits in that industry. So I guess soaked up as much as I could until I got to the point where I found myself in it.
And so in your experience and your career history, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in how tech supports businesses?
I mean, COVID's probably the biggest driver of change we've had in the last, in my career anyway. I'd say that tech has always been important. What I think, particularly in some of the industries we struggle with, like the legal sector, where you've got quite a traditional firm, that might be quite backwards in adopting some of the tech. So they might be the sort of people that still want to print out a contract to read it in paper rather than on a screen and stuff like that. So I think COVID was probably one of the biggest periods of change for us across our client base, because it actually forced people. It was no longer a nice to have or something that they could lean into. It was literally, you have to do this right now. We're all going remote overnight. So I think that was probably the biggest one. But like I say, we kind of have two extremes in the client bases that we have. We have these young startup companies that are really adopting and really open to new tech, and generally tend to be led by younger business owners. And then at the other extreme, we have these kind of more traditional, longer standing companies that maybe have got to where they are doing something, and it's harder to change that mindset, I think.
Do you feel like there's much of a difference between the way tech's evolved within regulated sectors, so that difference between public and private sector?
I think in certain aspects, so in terms of especially the security, so obviously dealing with regulated industries, they all have governing bodies that enforce guidelines and rules on how they act and what they should be doing. So I think they're forced to keep up with change, and to be continuously improving. Whereas I think some of the non-regulated clients that we have, or the kind of experience we have, is if something's working, they don't necessarily need to change it. And even though there might be a better, more efficient way, a more secure way, it works for them what they're doing, and they just kind of stick with it. There's no incentive to change unless that mindset from the business owner is kind of wanting to deliver those improvements.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to your work in IT security and also automation, has that influenced the way you operate your businesses and the services you provide?
Yeah, I mean, so internally we try and always practice what we preach.
Yeah.
So if we're saying you can do X, Y, and Z, we want to be doing it, or at least on that path to improving stuff ourselves. And I think especially for Everon and the work we do in managed services, we kind of see the future becoming a bit more commoditized in that IT support space.
Yep.
I think there's a couple of reasons to automate. One, cost. Obviously, people don't want to keep spending on something like that when they see it like an electricity supplier and it's just a necessary evil. And two, I think with the world of AI and all this kind of fancy stuff people can be doing, people don't always want to just sit on help desk and deal with IT problems. So I think when it comes to keeping staff and motivating them and giving them a path to grow towards, help desk isn't probably the perfect fit. So where we can automate a lot of those processes and take those tedious parts of people's jobs away, we're kind of going to deliver on both benefits. Our goal is to eliminate level 1 tickets from being a human related activity. We're not there yet, but right now we're using AI and automation to triage tickets and categorize them. We're using sort of 50% automation for onboarding, offboarding of staff and things like that, mailbox delegations. So the goal is to make that fully autonomous at some point in the future.
And do you think we'll see more of that across various sectors as well? I'm just thinking not only from, like you say, IT ticket support of view. Could be a controversial topic, but thinking about things like the scope of the NHS and problems like this, I mean, it's probably going to take more than a ticketing system to kind of fix the NHS, but why, when there's kind of tools like that readily available, do you think it's something we will see that could be implemented in a space like that would improve things over time?
I obviously am a tech enthusiast, so my answer is always going to be yes to stuff like that. I think if you understand that workflow and that process, there's tools that have been around for a long time that can automate it. So I think for any industry, it delivers benefits. Where I think it's problematic is, and I don't know if this is true of the NHS, but if you've got a lot of people that do things in different ways, or you don't quite have this is actually how I want to deliver stuff, and it's kind of a bit all over the place, it's really hard to deliver automation there. And I think people need to be engaged and adopting of what you're doing and how you're going to deliver something. And if you spoil it on day one by deploying something that doesn't work, you're just creating kind of a wall between where you want to be and where you are. So I think it's probably harder for bigger organisations where it's not as defined the process and the workflows.
Yeah.
But I can't see how in 5-10 years time everybody isn't going to have to be doing this. You wouldn't keep doing something that is going to set you behind your competitors. So eventually I think everybody will jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah. And in terms of collaborations or partnerships you've had in the past, can you kind of share some of your insights into the solutions that you've delivered through Everon?
Yeah, so legal sector is a big vertical for us. Going back to these companies that necessarily don't do automation they're quite underserved, I think, in my opinion, when it comes to case management systems. There's a lot of old tech debt, a lot of old programs that are just kind of band-aided and upgraded but not rewritten. So we actually partnered with a company called Clio, who are kind of disrupting the space. They're really big in Ireland and the US, but not quite big here yet. And where it became apparent that some of our clients who were stuck in a hybrid world because of these legacy case management systems, we partnered with Clio to deliver hopefully like a demo and some engagement where they could jump to the Clio product, which was fully cloud-based, and it would remove that roadblock and help deliver, I guess, benefits to the business as a whole. So where there's a product or a service that aligns with kind of what we're doing and the digital transformation or business improvement piece for our clients, we'll always entertain the conversation. More recently this year, we've partnered with a company called I Think 365, who do lots of Power App development. They've actually done something for the NHS, I think, in the last few months. But where we can kind of just do a fraction of that Power Automate stuff, they just live and breathe it. So we've essentially kind of partnered with them to say, look, where there's an opportunity and we know there's a better solution for someone, let's bring you in. You can kind of do what you guys do best, and everybody's benefiting us because we're showing value to the client. Client gets a better system, and then obviously the partner we're working with builds a rapport with us because we can introduce them to the right people as well.
And when it comes to, I mean, it's clear that you're very passionate about tech, and it does sound like it's your bread and butter. So tell us what it was like being recognised as one of Yorkshire's 42 under 42.
Mixed, to be honest. So obviously everybody loves recognition. What I'd say is that the things that got me that accolade or get everyone accolades, we're doing day in, day out anyway. And I think it sometimes means more to the outside world than it does to me. I'm not saying I'd ever turn it down, but I think the kind of boost for that for me was that friends, family, clients, prospects would all mention it and sort of ask me about it. But in terms of what I was doing, I was already doing those things anyway, so it didn't necessarily change my approach to anything.
And as you said, Everon's also been recognised as a Digital Enterprise Top 100 company. That's a significant achievement. How would you say that kind of recognition impacts the growth of the business specifically? Do you think it's provided more opportunity?
I think from a marketing perspective, I think it's really hard to compete nowadays. There's lots of people doing tech, there's lots of noise and advertising everywhere we look, and I think the social proof aspect is really meaningful. So where you've got accolades like that, I think it helps attract the right clientele and prospects, and it gets your foot in the door to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
So we went through a spell where probably not done as much recently, but we got quite a lot in a short space of time. It's something we probably need to do more of. And we're probably guilty of not necessarily shouting about all the things we do sometimes. So especially with some of the Power App bits that we're doing now, they're quite tailored niche solutions. They could be entered into like awards or like up for kind of recognition in the areas that they work in, not necessarily tech, but in those client verticals as well. But it's picking your battles at the minute.
When it comes to solutions, obviously taking a slight step back as well, thinking about what you were saying about automation, and sometimes there is a bit of resistance from people to automate things. What are some of the challenges you've sort of faced when you're delivering those systems within highly regulated industries?
Getting people to engage with it is number one. I think initially you have that phase where people potentially could feel threatened by what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So it's about engaging people early and making sure they feel part of what you're going to deliver and they understand the benefit to them. What we try and do is put out sort of questionnaires to all the stakeholders in a business before we deliver something, not necessarily just at board level. And the idea behind that is people feel like they've got a voice. And then from the feedback, we'll take some of the kind of quick wins that will help staff engage with what we're doing alongside some of the bigger picture bits that we do. And we'll try and blend them at the same time. So I'd say that's the key kind of thing that we really struggle with, or we really have to be on top of.
Yeah.
And I think depending on the industry or the company, it's changing that mindset from top down as well. If you haven't got someone bought in at the very top, it's really hard to push that down through their culture. So some of the other things that we do or have done recently at the expense of Everon is we've given away free applications. So if we've worked with a client and we kind of have continuous improvement reviews, we'll spot an area where we know we can help. And it might be something as small as the visitor sign-in books that, you know, the written books everybody has on the desk. Technically, they're not GDPR compliant. You write in everybody's details and everyone can see it. It's not a big thing and people aren't that worried about it. But what we've done for a few clients is replace it with an iPad with a Power App related digital sign-in sheet. And that's one way where if there's no cost and risk to the business owner, we can help change that mindset by giving them something free, let them see the benefit in it, and then they're more engaged going forwards.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because it's such a thing that's so small, but it makes a difference, doesn't it? People thinking about GDPR and compliancy and what have you. But it's interesting what you say about the mindset of people, and there does seem to be that fear. We've touched on it so many times in different episodes. Do you think it's just that fear that people feel they're going to be replaced rather than it's a tool that they can use to help them grow and the company grow?
I think so. I think especially with AI, which has amplified this message, a lot of the media is like doom and gloom or like extremes, and I think that doesn't help. And I think, people are worried about what's to come and the unknown. So I think where you can showcase a little bit of it and help them see how it will benefit them is massive. Obviously, like Microsoft branded their AI Copilot, and the aim is it's co-belonging. It's like with you, but there probably needs to be more of that message put out, or at least more people are experiencing it, so that they're aware of where we're going and what's happening.
And when it comes to AI and automation, how do you kind of see it shaping the future of IT operations and solutions?
So I think it's going to be massive. The cat's out of the bag, as it were, with AI. You're not going to not do something that somebody else is making massive gains from. I think right now where we're at is everybody's aware of AI. I think people just brand AI and automation the same thing. I think automation's been around a lot longer and is readily available, but people don't utilize it. And then I also think that right now people kind of want this flashy, shiny AI, but they haven't done the basics in utilizing Microsoft 365 properly and things like that. So I think the world's going to change with where we're heading with all this sort of stuff. But I think right now the key thing to do is to get your house in order, in a sense. And then when these AIs are becoming more mainstream or you've got more accessibility to it, you're going to get more benefit moving forwards. And I think the people thing, there's going to be certain industries or certain jobs that are going to benefit more or less from it. No one's going to sit and move data from one system to another system in the future. It isn't going to make sense. If that's somebody's job role, then you are going to be quite impacted by what happens in AI. But I guess now's the time to realise that might happen and work out how you can find an alternate role that works with the AI to do certain things. So it'll be interesting in the next few years.
And as you say, if we think about what's to come in the next few years and the way technology is evolving, what advice would you actually give to, say, an aspiring entrepreneur who's looking to break into the IT space or has an interest in IT and tech?
for their business.
Yes.
I would be trying to, you're never going to predict where we're going, and the rate of change is so massive, but I wouldn't necessarily be looking at what everybody else has done in the past and trying to replicate it, because I think we're at a point where those traditional companies that just deal with that traditional managed service are going to fade away over the next few years. I'd be looking at industries about pain points or problems, and how you can work solutions in, and you can be that kind of voice that educates people. I think that's what is going to benefit most people right now, is they know something's there, they don't know how to utilize it, they know they've got a problem. If you can marry the two together with a solution, I think you're in good standing.
Yeah, it's interesting as well when I think about, so not even from an aspiring entrepreneur point of view, for someone who's at school who's interested in tech. I mean, you mentioned earlier, and we were talking about, I remember the first big desktop computer and thinking about dial-up internet, the awful noise and what have you. Tech now, for people at school, they're just they grow up with it. There was no sort of training classes. Even toddlers know how to use iPads and what have you. But I also think there's so many more opportunities to break into tech than, say, a traditional university route. Would you agree with that? Do you think there's more potential now?
I think because it moves so fast, the industry, it's hard to teach somebody something that's been written in a curriculum that might only be 2 years old, but it's already out of date. So I think my advice to people that would be at that level would be just experiment with different things, find what you really like and you gel with, and then there's tons, like all the major brands offer their own certification paths. I'm sure there's graduate schemes and like work experience and things like that you can get alongside it. So that would be kind of my recommendation. Find the area that you like most, and then go down that path and explore it more.
That's nice. I think also something that's quite funny when I think back to being at school, and we were talking earlier about knowing what you want to do. Things like social media managers weren't around, or a job position, so I imagine there'll be so many more opportunities as well that present themselves within tech. I mean, what do you kind of think with AI? If you could hazard a guess at what the next sort of big job with AI will be, what do you think it could be?
So I don't necessarily know about 5 years in the future. That's probably a massive amount of time in terms of AI. But I think right now and over the next 2-3 years, it's all about data analysts and kind of understanding data to make sure that when you do apply AI or a logic to it, it's meaningful. I think if you look at the amount of data companies create now, it's massive, but we're not doing anything clever with it. We're not. Sometimes it's so siloed as well, because the way we've traditionally grown as businesses is you've gone out and got an accounting package, then you've got a HR package, then you've got a operations package, and they're all creating these siloed data points where there's no centralized data. There might be duplication and kind of data that's not set right or conflicted in there, and then we're going to try and put an AI on top. That's then going to not make any sense of it, because it doesn't make sense. So I think right now, if I was to look at opportunities in that space, I'd be looking at how I can make use of data, how I can structure it, how I can understand it, and then I can learn the AI bits and really make like massive gains.
And thinking about your career journey and, looking at Everon as a business, can you share a particular project or milestone that kind of stands out for you as a turning point, either for your career or for the business?
So I think, I don't know if there's necessarily one as such. I'd say in the early days, it was probably understanding that niching down to a particular industry was where we needed to be. And I've talked a lot about legal vertical. We didn't necessarily purposely choose that vertical. What happened was, when it got to a point where we realised we needed to niche down, we looked back at our client base, and it kind of just so happened the biggest sector was vertical. So I think that was a point of, right, this is the route we're going to go down, and we're going to keep going more. And that stood us in good success since then. And then I'd say more recently, going back to that siloed data analogy, we've started a sister company to Everon for Dynamics 365, because we kind of believe that's where the future of like applications is going to lie, in like centralised platforms, not in kind of
tech
individual
ground.
apps. So I guess that was probably early last year where I had a client with a particular problem. We couldn't fix it in our normal tech stack. We couldn't find the right solution. And then when we looked at the next evolution in the Microsoft world, because we're a Microsoft house, it was Dynamics. So I think that's the defining point for where we're heading in the future.
And what new opportunities or challenges are you most excited about when it comes to continuing to lead at Everon?
Obviously the AI and automation piece is really cool. I think we need to move away from what it does in Outlook or Excel or Word. We need to talk about what opportunities it can deliver for a business. But being able to be involved in a project like that where you can see meaningful change to a client rather than just fix somebody's printer or reset somebody's password is a completely different space. So, I mean, we've already started on this with kind of Copilot agents in Azure. We've got a project right now that we're looking at incoming emails being classified as sales leads or not by a Copilot, and then given a sort of temperature score and fed into a sales system, which at the minute 3 people spend a lot of time just constantly checking these emails. Whereas moving forwards, it will be automated and they will just check the ones that the system isn't sure about. And that's something that will deliver a genuine difference for those people and for that business, which is a lot more exciting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, speaking of the future of tech and AI and the way things are moving forward, it segues us nicely onto the trending kind of already touched on. Is AI going to take your job? Is a hot topic. As we touched on, there's a common fear with many employees, but surprisingly, there's so many benefits to actually implementing AI, which we've kind of touched on today. But the kind of key takeaway from the recent survey that was carried out from MIT was that 60% of workers who work with robotics and AI think they'll actually see a positive career impact as a result in terms of productivity, satisfaction, and job safety. But the report reads, this paper finds that more workers report potential benefits from new tech like robots and AI in terms of helping their safety and comfort at work, their pay, and autonomy on the job. Workers with jobs that ask them to solve complex problems feel valued by their employers and are motivated to move up in their careers and feel like they're more likely to see new tech as beneficial. Long story short, how do you think the growing integration of AI and robotics in the workplace will impact that job satisfaction, productivity, and career development in the long run?
So I think it's that mindset change. It's that removing that fear and understanding what benefits it can bring. We both talked earlier about having to recruit people at the minute and how it can be tougher than ever to find people. You've got more companies delivering IT because you don't have to be on site anymore. We're competing with companies from a wider geographic area. So to be able to give somebody a job that doesn't have those tedious elements in it, but is more engaging and has a path to kind of advance and do more complex, more meaningful things, I think has only got to benefit that from a retention and a recruitment side of things. I think, as I sort of alluded to earlier, if your only job is to move this bit of text from here to there, you need to have a think about where you want to be in the future, because I think that's where the problem and the fear lies, and that isn't going to be a role that we'll keep doing over and over again. It doesn't make sense. And that's not even necessarily an AI that will take that. That's just an automation. So I think if you're in that kind of element or role, you should be looking at areas where you can take what you know. It might be that data analyst that we talked about. You understand the data set and what you're doing. How can you apply an AI to that to do more for that business, to do more for you? And I think it's the mindset that needs to change and removing that fear. I think once people use it, they then ask, can we now do this? Can we now do that? But I think it's at the minute, because it's quite unknown, people are stuck being told how to use it, which I don't think necessarily helps either. But I think the bottom line is, if you're company A and you compare company B has deployed a lot of AI and is making twice the gains you are, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to compete or you're going to fade out. and it's just about working with the right, I guess, people culture in your business to ensure that people aren't left behind but brought along on that journey as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested to know, especially because you work within this space and you're kind of around tech all the time, do you use much tech in your kind of personal space as well? Because we had one of our last guests mentioned interestingly that even when he's kind of brainstorming ideas, he might brainstorm them off chat GPT. I mean, do you use much tech within?
Yeah, so Copilot and ChatGPT I use, and again, essentially for that, like, what I kind of find is that sometimes it's hard for me to shut off sometimes outside of 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And if I have an idea, but I'm not quite sure like where to go with it, or I'm doing something, it might be that you're in the shower, you're doing something random. It's easy just to make a note of it. Yeah. And I've got one of the Remarkable tablets as well, which I use all the time. So just jot it down. And then when I get back to work, I've got a bit more time to actually look at it more. This or that round. So how I'm going to work it. And I'll use ChatGPT, can't say it, or Copilot to help me like sort of build out an idea or a document, a piece of content, whatever it's trying to do. But in terms of like going home and sitting on a computer and stuff like that, I try and do very little of that. I do love tech, obviously. Like got Sonos at home that I really love, and things like that. But not necessarily going and doing lots. Yeah,
it's quite interesting you say that, because one of the things it's made me think of, and I was speaking to someone about this the other day. Nowadays, obviously we do most of our bits and pieces on our mobile phones in our personal time, but there's still things like when it comes to booking a holiday, I always get my laptop out. It's big stuff like that. I can't imagine doing it on my phone. I don't know how you're kind of wired when it comes to stuff like that.
Do you know what? So I'll do kind of things if I'm out and about on my phone. Otherwise, if I'm with my laptop, I'll use my laptop. I think there's a whole, I guess, conversation there around boundaries as well. And like, I did have this chat recently with someone that runs a HR and people company about how your phone has like all your personal elements in it, but work has crept into it. And it's really hard to create a divide now. So I think having a different device you use gives you a bit of a balance, doesn't it?
So speaking of devices, that segues. iPhone or Samsung?
iPhone.
And Spotify or Apple?
Spotify. I think it's the best £10 to spend a month is the Spotify.
And Netflix or cinema?
Netflix.
And laptops or tablets?
Laptops.
And ChatGPT or virtual reality?
ChatGPT.
And video calls or voice notes?
Video calls. I can't. My brother all the time voice notes me. I'm like, we might as well just have a phone call at this point. Like, so definitely. I'm old school.
Yeah. And finally, Jamie, if you could bring back one original piece of tech that's either evolved now or it doesn't exist anymore, what would it be and why?
So I was thinking about this the other day. I think I'd have to say my BlackBerry.
Oh, really?
So going back to that whole blending of worlds and things like that, I think it didn't do lots of things other than work-related bits. Like I did calls and texts and stuff, but it was a work device. And now that I've got an iPhone and it does both, it's really hard. Like I'll be on holiday and I'll check stuff, even Teams. Whereas I think with my BlackBerry, it was work, did emails, did the basic stuff, but I wasn't tempted to take it on holiday, I did different stuff.
Yeah, you never know, we might see something like that creep back in.
I think, is it Nokia that own them now? They still sort of go, but it's not the same, is it?
No. Oh, Jamie, that brings us to the end of this week's episode. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, I've enjoyed it.